Welcome to this explainer. Okay, right now there's a massive, highly charged political storm brewing over your retirement savings here in Australia. The core of the whole debate, it's whether everyday folks should be allowed to dip into their superannuation, their locked away retirement funds, early, just to pay off mortgages and cover these soaring living expenses. It's a fierce battle. We're talking ideology versus economics, and it basically asks one simple question. Is it your money to use right now, or is it strictly locked away for your future?
To really unpack this complex issue impartially, we're going to look at both sides of the coin before diving into the practical financial math. We'll start off with the superannuation referendum, then explore the case for access, examine the case against it, and finally finish up with navigating mortgages and debt.
So let's jump right into part one, the superannuation referendum.
This whole thing kicked off following a political proposal by Pauline Hanson to loosen the strict regulations around our retirement funds. And to understand why this has politicians and industry heavyweights so absolutely fired up, you just have to look at the sheer scale of the money involved. $4.4 trillion. Yeah, you heard that right. That is the staggering size of the Australian superannuation pool right now. When you talk about opening up access to a fund this massive, you aren't just talking about personal finance anymore, are you? You're literally talking about the foundation of the national economy.
To put that astronomical number into perspective for a second, that $4.4 trillion retirement pool is literally twice the size of the combined state and federal government debt owed to the world. Let that sink in. It's a monumental pile of capital just sitting there in the banks, which pretty much explains why any proposal to tap into it creates immediate shockwaves.
And the government's reaction? Well, it's been swift and fierce. Treasurer Jim Chalmers strongly condemned the plan to loosen these regulations. He stated that this would be, quote, the end of super as we know it, and he's even framed the upcoming election directly around this issue. From the government and the super industry's perspective, protecting this multi-trillion-dollar pool from being drained is absolutely paramount to the nation's long-term economic stability.
But on the flip side, you have the core argument from Pauline Hanson and the proposal's supporters. They state it simply. You should be able to access retirement savings. It's your money. And there it is. That right there sets up the fundamental ideological divide of this entire debate. Is the government protecting your future, or are they keeping your own earnings out of your hands when you need them the most?
Which brings us to part two, the case for access. So, what exactly is the financial case for early access? Well, financial expert Olivia Maragna makes a pretty compelling point here. When you look at it from an employer's point of view, superannuation isn't some magical bonus, right? It's actually part of the total cost to employ you. She compares it directly to a withholding tax. Just like an employer withholds tax on your wages and sends it off to the government, they withhold your super. The crucial point here is it legitimately is your money, which is exactly why people care so deeply about who gets to control it.
Let's consider the practical application of this. Banks generally structure mortgages for 30 years. Now, if you're struggling to enter the property market and you can't buy your first home until you're, say, 45, you're facing the prospect of carrying heavy debt right into your retirement, and that severely drains your cash flow later in life. But, and here's the kicker, if a young person could access just $10,000 or $20,000 from their super today, it could be the exact deposit they need to secure a property at age 30. That sets them up with a massive asset well before they actually retire.
Or think about someone approaching the end of their working life who still has, let's say, a $150,000 mortgage hanging over them. If the rules were relaxed enough to let them use their super to just wipe out that debt 5 years before retirement, the relief on their cash flow would be immense. I mean, owning your home outright in retirement, putting a solid roof over your head without paying rent or a mortgage, is widely considered one of the best ways to secure your financial future.
All right, let's look at the other side in part three, the case against access.
When looking at the macroeconomic risks, the Treasurer points directly to the previous COVID-19 early release scheme as a massive, glaring warning sign. That temporary program resulted in an estimated $83.8 billion shortfall in retirement savings. That's tens of billions of dollars permanently removed from the compounding growth engine of the superannuation system. Critics argue that this leaves everyday workers significantly poorer in the long run.
And, that COVID release scheme revealed a fascinating psychological reality. During that period, two things were true at once. Yes, some disciplined people used the windfall perfectly. They secured first homes, watched their property values soar, and effectively beat the super fund's return. But others? Well, they took the cash and spent it at retailers like JB Hi-Fi.
Those folks essentially threw away decades of compound interest for short-term consumer goods, and now they're going to face a massive struggle trying to catch back up for a comfortable retirement.
This introduces a really crucial concept. Most people are what financial experts call commitment savers. Let's be totally honest with ourselves. The majority of us don't have the iron discipline to just stockpile cash in a bank account. We actually need the forced action of an obligatory debt, like a mortgage hanging over our heads, to force us to save and build wealth. If you suddenly give millions of undisciplined people easy, relaxed access to their super, injecting billions directly into the retail economy, well, economists warn it could drastically worsen the inflation crisis we're already fighting.
So you got to ask yourself, does raiding retirement do more long-term damage than short-term good? It's a really delicate balancing act. Giving people a lifeline right now might cost them their security later. But on the flip side, forcing them to struggle today while a massive pot of their own money sits untouched, that seems equally painful to a lot of people. To answer this, we need to look past all the politics and strictly at the raw numbers.
That leads us to our final section, Part 4, Navigating Mortgages and Debt.
Regardless of the politics, the core of this issue comes down to a really tough mathematical hurdle. Right now, everyday people are dealing with average mortgage interest rates hovering around 6 to 7%. For it to mathematically make sense to leave your money locked in superannuation rather than paying down that heavy debt, your super fund needs to consistently generate a return of 8 to 9%. And honestly, that's a pretty high bar. As interest rates climb, the argument for allowing people to use their super to find mortgage relief becomes mathematically stronger.
A caller to the 4BC program named Lynn brought up a fantastic point about the nature of these loans. It's essentially a battle of interest types. The compound interest growing in your superannuation versus the simple, front-loaded interest of a mortgage. Because modern bank loans heavily weight your initial payments toward interest, paying down a lump sum early directly attacks the principal before the bank's interest can, well, eat you alive.
So, what should you actually take away from all this if you're struggling right now? Expert Olivia Maragna lays out some highly practical, everyday strategies. First, utilize offset accounts to reduce the interest calculated on your loan. Second, shop around. Really, don't remain blindly tied to just one bank. Move your loans to find better deals. And finally, fully understand the difference between your principal and interest payments so you can strategize how to actually pay down your debt, not just service the bank's profit margins.
We're going to leave you with this provocative thought to chew on. The government wants to protect this system. Politicians want to give you access. But at the end of the day, if your retirement fund is truly your money, who is ultimately responsible for securing your financial future? Is it the state, the super funds, or is it you? Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer, and we'll see you next time as we continue to break down the issues that matter most.